Hi, welcome to the second series of Let's Go Kickass today. I'm your host, Vicky Carter, and I get to interview incredibly kick-ass people from the fields of music, adventure and culture. So if you want to feel empowered and inspired, you've come to the right place. In this episode, I chat to the super talented composer and pianist Nikki Yeoh. We talk about a variety of different things, including how she started playing piano when she was just 3 and the trials and tribulations of a career in the music industry.
Know your worth and always keep your integrity. The best thing you can do is really push yourself and don't let too many other people's opinions of you or your work cloud your judgment.
I also speak to 4 world record elite marathon runner, lifelong vegan and sanctuary owner Fiona Oakes about how she gets over the pain during her running and why she does it.
There is another element to sport which always gets missed, and that's the mental approach. And if you've got a reason to be out there that's far greater than anything else that you can value on this planet, you will, I think, find that ability to dig that extra bit deep.
Finally, I speak to Ruby Raut, CEO and co-founder of Wicker period pants, about menstruation, if it's still such a taboo subject, and how period pants are the future.
Young generation, it's our duty, but it's our duty to educate the older generation as well, so that they don't pass that incorrect information to the next growing children.
First up is talented pianist and composer Nikki Yeoh, who's worked with Courtney Pine, The Roots, the list goes on. She talks to me about the beautiful, unusual places she's performed at, the process of creating her solo album, Solo Gemini, and her musical influences on her work, as well as jazz as a genre. I ask her, what inspired you to play the piano?
I started playing the piano when I was 3 years old.
3?
Yeah, it was. My nan had bought this little toy piano from, I'd say it was an antique shop, but it's kind of a junk shop in the market, very trendy market, Exworth Market, but it used to be very working class. Yeah, now it's all like really beautiful eateries. So she bought this like little Victorian toy piano, and I'd bash out some tunes, and then my family started realising that I was playing actual tunes like nursery rhymes or copying off the TV.
You copied off the TV, you were able to play just from copying?
Yeah, like little simple melodies. I mean, not sort of like, I'm not Mozart, you know.
But still, that's very impressive.
You know what? I didn't realise that was a big deal until I actually had a child. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess 3 years old is quite a big deal, really. I started having piano lessons when I was about 5. I had a few. Didn't like necessarily having lessons, so I had a couple. And then my mum bought me a keyboard to practice on, a Bontempi, this like 1970s electric piano, which was cool. And then I started really getting into it. And my granddad, who was a London taxi driver, I lived with my nan and my granddad and my mum, and he was like, we need to get her a piano. So he worked extra shifts in order to buy me a piano.
Oh.
Yeah, he took a loan out of the bank for £300,
Wow.
which was a lot of money back in the day, and worked extra shifts to pay off for that loan to buy me my piano.
Oh, that's lovely. And when you started playing piano, was it a labour of love? Did you find it difficult to actually start practicing, or that's it, you were enthralled by it?
Always been a passion. Just like, if I was bored, I'd go and play the piano. If, no one ever had to tell me to practice.
That's so good, because I remember as a kid I was pushed to play the piano, and when you're pushed to play something or do something, you don't want to do it.
Absolutely.
But because you did it just on your own accord, then you fell in love with it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the same. You're very gifted with, language and communication. So,
Thank you.
Yeah, well, it's true. The work that I've always done with you is like you're very natural. So that's your thing. So everybody's gifted in a different way. Not everybody's gifted in music, but everybody wants their child to be gifted in something. And sometimes musical instruments are the most obvious thing of, let me see if you've got that gift. And then I'm paying loads of money for it, so let me push you to be good. So I understand from a parent's perspective, but to be honest, you've either got that in you or you haven't. And there are other wonderful gifts in the world that need to be celebrated as well. So not everybody can communicate easily like yourself. Some people would absolutely freak out to just sit in front of a microphone. So, everybody's got their strengths. That's what makes the world go round.
I know, exactly. Everyone's unique with their own gifts. That's
absolutely
wonderful.
Yeah.
So what was it like from that period of your life where you've just navigating your way around a piano to then creating and collaborating and gigging around the world?
Well, it's always sort of been on my radar, really. I'd always had the ambition or desire, or I guess maybe intuition, that I would be a musician. So even like when I went to my English grandparents and my mum, they took me to my dad's heritage and cultural land of Malaysia when I was 8 years old, because they wanted me to see where that side of my family, how they lived, and you know, that kind of thing. And I remember my nan buying me like a really small little pink fly bag, like a little, it's called a flight bag. No one ever has those now, right? A flight bag. and she said, like, this is your flight bag, so when you're touring around the world when you're older, you could take this with you.
Oh, that's so sweet.
It's so cute.
She sowed
right?
the seed at a young age.
Right, I was like, okay, and I just rolled with it. I was like, yeah, you know what? Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I don't have that bag anymore, sadly.
I was going to say, but did you use a flight bag, and do you still do so? Something similar when you're touring?
Yeah, I absolutely love traveling and love like anything to do with like traveling. I'm always like perusing luggage and bags online. So that would be like the lightest one to put all of my stuff in. So yeah, so it's all, I've had a passion, and I love, it's not very PC now, but I do love flying. I wish it wasn't causing such an impact on our beautiful environment. But I do love travelling, and I actually love the whole process of going to the airport and flying. But I'm going to have to find a different way to get around now.
It's really difficult when you've got such a love for travelling, and you've got to think, okay, we've got to be more ethical now. And yeah, you won't be able to reach to these more far-flung countries, or you're going to have to travel by boat and other means, which makes it more difficult, especially when you've got a certain time limit that you can only use with regards to like holidays.
Absolutely.
So it's like, well, if it's going to take me 10 days to get there,
yeah,
I'm only really going to have 4 days there if I've only got a certain amount of holidays. So.
Yeah, good. A friend of mine who's an amazing musician, Masson, she's a fantastic tenor saxophone player. She actually did a gig, I think it was in Norway, some Scandinavian far place, and she decided she's not going to fly. She's not going to take like an EasyJet cheap flight. She's going to go with train and boat and fisherman's boat. And
wow, good for her.
It took her forever, but she did it, and she come back the same way as well.
That's amazing.
But she's like, mate, I can't do that every week. I'll just be traveling.
That's a lot of time. Yeah, exactly. You spend a lot of time traveling, because a lot of musicians, one of the impacts on their mental health is touring. It's that constant moving and the pressure to perform at a high standard day in, day out, and being away from your loved ones. But you never had any difficulties with that then?
It's a weird one. I mean, I've always loved playing anywhere, you know, whether it's home in the UK, in London, or on the other side of the world. And I've always loved that whole process of being away with you know, your band, or even if it's me doing a gig on my own. And I haven't really had the kind of lengthy tours that a lot of, say, pop musicians would have. So it's like with the jazz thing, it's like you're away for a bit and then you're home. It's not like you're away for 6 months at a time. So yeah, it doesn't really have that same kind of impact on your life. The thing that it does have an impact on is coming back into, I guess, regular civilian life, so to speak, and like having to then prepare dinner, get up and do the school run as a mum, you know. Yeah. But it's one of those double-edged swords, because if I don't go on the road and I don't tour, then I really miss it, and there's part of you that's just like, I need to get back out there, I need to play. And then when you're away, then you're like, yeah, I do miss home as well, miss my son or whatever. But it's just one of those things. I love what I do, so I'd much rather do that than be doing an office job every day.
And that's it. You found what sets your soul on fire. You found what you're talented at. And if you can do each at an equal balance and be able to drop in and drop out of either, then that works well. That's
sure.
Really good.
And I think it's like a mate of mine, he always makes his bed on the road, the bass player in my band. And I said, why do you do that when there's like, you know, somebody who comes in and does your bed for you and you're in a hotel, right? So like we're staying somewhere for a week. And he's like, well, it's always kept him constant and consistent. Like, you make your bed every day at home, you make your bed on the road. It gives you a perspective on your life, and doesn't matter where you are, this is just what you do. So I don't say I do that in hotels. I'm here for a break, darn it. Like, you know?
Well, you do it all the time at home.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, definitely.
What unusual places have you been to and performed in?
Yeah, one of the most beautiful gigs I did, I guess all of the most beautiful gigs I've done have been in the Caribbean. So that's
Oh gosh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I did in 2000, I think it was, or 2001, these guys called me to do a concert in Barbados. They said, do you want to come and do a gig in Barbados?
Oh my gosh, yes, I could do that right now.
Same. I'm just like, anytime you want me to do a gig in Barbados, I am there. And it was for, you know, the supermodel Gemma kid?
Oh yes.
For her parents, they have a jazz festival every year.
Oh, fantastic. In Barbados.
Right? In Barbados.
Oh,
And
gorgeous.
Jodie Kid was there and her brother. And it was very cool. They're so nice as well. And they put a stage over the swimming pool.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Was it see-through?
No, if only. It wasn't.
I would have been terrified if it was see-through though, because then I thought I would have been falling in. I'm glad it wasn't see-through.
And the grand piano as well on top. Right?
Oh my gosh, there was a grand
An actual
piano.
grand piano. Yeah, full length. Yeah.
Crikey. Oh my, this stresses me out.
Yeah. I was borderline stressed, but then I love to swim. So I was like, partly I just wanted to just get in the water.
Yes.
Like, it's actually like, because if I see water, I've just got to jump in. That's just my thing. I'm like, I've got to swim. But yeah, that was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful.
That's so serene and calming. I can imagine that setting is stunning.
Yeah.
And speaking about water, you like to jump in. I know you've spoken previously before about gigging. I think it was in Scandinavia, and you went and performed somewhere. And then you did some traditional baths afterwards.
That's it, in Finland. I think that's yeah. I'd just come back from there when I saw you actually for that interview. That was brilliant. I mean, I think the water was 5 degrees. Although I think then the ladies' pond in Hampstead Heath said to me, it never actually gets more cold than that. It's the top layer can freeze, but the water is always at 5. Yeah, that's why it doesn't freeze completely all the way down to the ground. Like the top layer will freeze. Yeah, so otherwise it would be just all completely ice. So that was so cool because they have like a sauna there as well. So you can jump in, but you know you can get warm again as well.
I can see why you love gigging. You're living your best life.
I'm living my best life. I will rinse out every single moment of an opportunity if I travel. Like some of the guys will be like, "Yo, I'm gonna stay in bed till like 10 o'clock," and I'm just like, "I'm going up. I'm going to go for a run."
Yeah, make the most of it. Explore the city, especially when you wake
totally.
up early and you go for a run and you see the city and the place waking up. I think that's always so beautiful.
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. Speaking about all the different gigs and who you've gigged with, I mean, has there been any moments where you've turned yourself and you just thought, wow, I'm really feel blessed to be here right now performing with this person?
Yeah, it happens a lot. I mean, it even happened the other day. Like I was just doing a little gig with Dennis Baptiste, the saxophone player that I play with quite a bit, and we both we were playing some standards. It wasn't an advertised gig. It was just a gig. It was a corporate gig for a launch for a festival, actually, private invite. So we played this one standard, and it was really cool. And then we both decided to play the head double time, but neither of us looked at each other. Nobody said anything. And we just went for it. It was like pure magic.
Wow.
Yeah, and the bass player in the band, Gary Crosby, he was just like, "Did you guys plan that?" It was so weird. And we was like, "No, we just felt to do that." And to me, I mean, that is what it's about for me. You know, having that connection with people that I've played with for a long time, and it's almost like telepathy. And then you're really just, you know, reaching into the realms of artistic beyond rather than actually physically playing an instrument. It becomes something intangible, and you cannot do that again. It's not a thing that you do voluntarily. It's something that just either happens or it doesn't. That kind of synchronicity, that's just a blessing.
It's a shared magic moment that, you know, will give you goosebumps at the time.
100%. Even thinking about it now, I can get goosebumps about that moment.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so you play a variety of different gigs, music festivals and corporate gigs and with bands. What's it like coming out with your solo work now, with your solo album, Gemini, and duets as well, and performing and gigging around loads of different places?
I love it. I mean, at the moment, I'm getting ready to do some concerts with Zoe Rahman. So we've been doing a duo project. So 2 pianists. We both happen to both be women, but we don't make a big deal out of that. We're just 2 musicians. And we're going to be playing Pizza Express in Soho on the 18th of March. And we're going to play the Sage Gateshead, which is up north in the northeast. And that is on the 22nd of March. And so for me, it's like, that's it's a weird project for us, like in a good way. We both keep saying it's so weird having both of us because we're so alike in a lot of ways, and then suddenly you've got 4 hands at your disposal.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like she'll be like, oh, you know, sometimes you'll think, I want to play the bass and the chords and a melody and a harmony an octave above, and you can't because your hands are only so big. When there's both of us, we can do exactly that.
That's insane. How does this work? So obviously it's practice, and and so you know each other so well. You've got this partnership,
yes,
and you know when the flow is. That must be incredible for listeners, for anyone and everyone just seeing there and seeing that happen.
Yes, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, we play on 2 pianos. There's one point where Zoe comes over to my piano. We're playing on 1 piano, but it's. Yeah, because there's a language within jazz as well that is universal, but all jazz musicians know it. So there's all of that stuff, but then there's musical chemistry, and then there's piano language as well. So there are some things we do that are just super pianistic, other things that are just like based on being a London jazz musician and that kind of vibe that you get from having all of those different influences. Like there's a little bit of reggae in there, there's a little bit of, there'll be swing, there's a little bit of funk, there's a whole kind of different kind of London sound that we have, and we're both composers, so we play completely original material, our own material, 50-50. We've made it very fair, you know, no girl dramas on this gig.
Good. Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
So talking about your influences, whilst composing your tracks, is it something that you've had in your mind for a long time, which you think, you've stemmed or from all of your experiences, and you've collected that, and you kind of put them on the side, and you think, oh, I do want to work on that track one day, or it just came naturally before this project?
There's a couple of pieces that I'd actually written that were just for 2 pianos. So the actual title track of my album Solo Gemini, that piece was written for 2 pianos, and I used to play along with a recording of myself playing it, or like I'd play that live. I'd put that video on the screen. This is before people were really using screens. This is before the multimedia kind of thing. So I'd play along with that. So there'd be an image of me playing, and I'd be playing along with that.
Wow, that's cool.
It's cool because I heard all those extra parts, and I'm like, well, I need to have those parts, but I can't play all of them, so
I haven't got enough hands.
yeah, it's like so Zoe now plays the other part, which is cool.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
And so you were speaking about this London sound that with your musical influences. Do you think this makes jazz more accessible for people who may not be the traditional, as you know, many years ago that's how they would have accessed jazz or seen jazz? And do you enjoy experimenting with these different influences and doing so?
Yeah, I think like whatever you are as a musician, wherever you come from, that's going to come out in your music. So, you know, Jan Garbarek, who's I think he's from, what's that place? I think he's is he Danish or Norwegian? Don't quote me on
One
that.
of the two.
He's Scandinavian.
Yeah.
But you hear all of that kind of landscape, the space, the fjords, you hear that in his playing, because it's very open, and it's got that sort of sound. And then when you listen to like bebop from like the Charlie Parker era, you can hear New York, the chaos in it, but also the intricacies of all of, I think if you're surrounded by like really intricate architecture, that's going to give you a bit of a mathematical brain, and all the stuff was very mathematical. So it's going to come out in your playing somehow.
Just going back to the point that you said about how you 2 female pianists and you don't want to make a big deal out of it. Do you feel that the media makes a big deal out of it when your posters and your advertising, your marketing is going out there, or venues, or maybe even people who come and listen to your music?
Yeah, it's a weird one actually, because both Zoe and I have come up against slight challenges with promoters. So there was one guy who shall remain nameless.
Yeah.
I'd done a gig with him with another band, and I said, oh, you know, I released my solo album last year at the time, and I said, it'd be great to come and do a solo gig. You've got such a nice piano at your venue. And he said, oh yeah, but we've already had Zoe Rahman.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, okay, but we are 2 different people, right?
Yeah, we make music completely differently, and we have different sounds.
Yeah, and also the fact that we're both she's half Bengali and half English. I'm half Malaysian, half English, and maybe like they just get a bit confused. Like we're actually two different people.
Wow.
It's like saying, oh, we can't have another blonde presenter, Vicky. We've got somebody else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. So it was not just a race thing, but the gender thing, and it's just it's boring now because it's been going on a long time, you know. Or people would call Zoe for a gig, and they'd be looking for an all-woman band, and she'd be like, I'm so not up for that. And then they'd call me, or vice versa.
Wow.
And then I'd get on the phone and say, Zoe, did you just get a call from this person? She's like, yeah, I knew they were going to call you.
Oh my gosh.
Coming back to your question earlier on about making it more accessible. For me, like my mum was never ever into jazz, ever. She just didn't like it. She actually would say, I really don't like jazz.
Wow. How did she feel when you were like, so?
I guess my way to rebel was to play jazz. But then she came to my gigs and she's like, she absolutely loves it. And it's not just because it's me playing. I think it's sometimes people have an image of what they think jazz is. And they think it's very highbrow. They're not going to be able to understand it. And actually, it depends on who you see. I mean, it's like saying I don't like classical music. And it's so broad. You could listen to, like, you know, 16th century Gregorian chants, and then you can listen to like Bach and Stravinsky, and it's completely different styles of music. It's the same like with any pop music. If you say I don't like pop music, you think everything's going to sound exactly like Genesis, you know, who are fantastic, by the way. You know,
but
I think
they vary so differently.
And from artist to artist, actually, you know, I would say people should just give it a go.
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
and you've won an award in 2017.
That's correct, yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that and how it felt receiving it.
It was amazing. It was really amazing, Vicky, because I'd literally, you know, I started my career, I started playing professionally when I was 19. Then I had my son when I was 30. So there was then a little bit of an unrequested pause, unrequested from the universe, but it came anyway. Whereas I think people just thought she's had a baby, she's doesn't need to work. I think the baby will just go out and find food for itself. So right. So it was strange because then, you know, then I'm parenting and getting into that whole new learning curve of being a mum and all of that. And then my manager, who's been my manager for a long time, said, come on, you just need to do your album. Let's do it. Let's do your album. So when I'd had my son, it was right at the peak of a lot of attention because I'd just done an album with Cleveland Watkins. It wasn't my first album. It was like a duo album. And we had a nice tour and stuff like that. And then I found out I was expecting my son. And then all of a sudden, there was this massive gap. So when I recorded the album in 2014, that was 10 years after I'd had my son.
How did it feel going back into it? Because it must have felt slightly different. You've changed as a person, your own personal experiences, and so has the industry as well. Yeah,
all of that, all of the above. And I totally procrastinated big time with every bit of pushing. Talk about people pushing. He was like my pushy parent in a way.
That's good, yeah.
I'm glad. He's a brilliant manager. And if he hadn't said, come on, just get on with it, I might have just lost so much confidence in my ability that I wouldn't have got back on the horse. So then we sourced how I could record it. We got some money from Jazz Services. It was an organisation that existed at the time, and Aldborough Music invited me to be artist in residence so I could go and do some writing and record my album. So we'd record it first, because the way a lot of artists do, they record it first and then they shop it around to different record labels. And coming from a place where in my 20s I had, massive write-ups in all the major newspapers, the middle page of Telegraph magazine or in colour and all of this, and people knocking on my door, we want to sign you. To coming from that to then being 40 and knocking on people's doors and saying I've got this album. My manager was doing the knocking. I was just at home trying to bury my head in the sounds a little bit further. And then they're like, we're not really interested in that.
Wow.
Right? So then you just think, okay, yeah, then there's all of my lack of confidence is totally justified because they're not interested in it either. As an artist, she's quite a sensitive person. So to then I thought, okay, well, they don't want it, I'll just have to put it out myself.
Good for you.
Right? And actually, that means I've recouped and then some of all of my initial outlay, which is brilliant. And then all of a sudden I had a beautiful surprise. They've invited me, they've been nominated to be Instrumentalist of the Year at the Jazz FM Awards. So I'm like totally the outsider in the race, if there is a race. It's not really a race, but yeah, for one,
definitely not an outsider.
At the time, yes, because I felt like I was really forgotten about, and the two incredible musicians who I was up against, you know, they're very successful and have done incredible things, and also they are still fantastic, you know. But I thought I don't stand a chance. So when it was Courtney Pine was giving out the award, and when he read out my name, I could not believe it. I was, and my manager hadn't told me I won it. He knew actually, but he decided to not tell me because he wanted it to be a natural surprise.
Yes, that's lovely.
So it's great, and I got to meet the Rolling Stones that night, which was brilliant.
Amazing.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
It was proper cool. It was great, and actually, then like, you know, my career's grown from there, strength to strength. So now it's back to where it was, you know. But it's a journey, but that's life, right?
Yeah, it's a definite journey. That's incredible.
Mm.
What advice would you give to someone who's listening and is lacking that motivation and that inspiration that they've taken a career break to get back onto their feet, whether that's they've had children or any other thing that could have affected them?
Sure. I would just say always stay true to yourself. So always know your worth and always keep your integrity. The best thing you can do is really push yourself and don't let too many other people's opinions of you or your work cloud your judgment. And if you are feeling like you're sort of doubting yourself, just remember why you started playing, or whatever it is you do, painting or cooking or whatever your passion is, and go with it, you know, because if you don't put yourself out there, then nothing can happen. You know, you can be the greatest pianist in your own house and just practicing, and no one could ever hear you. But what is the point of that, really? You need to play to people. You need to have other people's ears listening to you play. Otherwise, what's the point?
What a wonderful woman, right? Every time I've interviewed Nikki Yeoh, I've always had a fabulous good old chat with her, and hopefully that came across in the interview. It's really interesting to learn of her journey through the music industry, and how that if you do want to take a break from your career, whether that be for mental health, for children, or even switching and changing job, it's never too late to achieve your dreams. Next up is Fiona Oakes. She's a 4 world record elite marathon runner, a lifelong vegan. She owns her own animal sanctuary, and she talks to me about her natural rejection to meat at a young age and her life as a vegan, her passion for animals, how she ended up casually winning marathons around the world to highlight that plant-based life is best, and how she overcomes pain when running a marathon.
Altogether, we've got around about 500 animals, ranging from huge Highland cattle to hamsters, literally, and everything in between. So we've got horses, sheep, pigs, goats, dogs, cats, turkeys, geese. You know, we've got the full spectrum of like domestic and ex-farmed animals.
And what inspired you to set up a sanctuary?
I think it's always been a dream. I didn't actually start Tower Hill Stables as a sanctuary. We actually wanted to provide sanctuary to the animals that we'd already rescued. We were particularly horses. Story is that we were both working in London. I've particularly always had this dream of nurturing animals. I've been vegan since I was 6 years old. So the natural progression then is to want to look after them and care for them. Never thought it was going to be possible. And so we were rescuing animals, and at an ordinary bungalow, we got dogs and cats and a few chickens and chinchillas and various other small animals. And the larger animals, horses, we'd got at livery yards. And one day I cycled home from work and called my horses over. They were all in a field together. 7 came, 1 didn't, and I found him impaled on a fence. He very nearly lost his life. He went to House and Jackson Vets, and he was there for 13 weeks. It's one of the worst injuries they've ever seen. Nearly lost his hindquarter. And in that period of time, we decided we got to change the model. We couldn't keep entrusting our animals to people that weren't kind of caring for them in the way we wanted. And that was back in 1996. And that's when we managed to acquire Tower Hill Stables, which was our other site. And it's just grown and grown and grown from there.
And so this passion for animals and obviously an activist as well is reflected in your veganism. As you said, you've been vegan since you were 6. Yeah. Is that what inspired you in the first place? Is there a pivotal moment you remember when you were 6 and you're like, actually, I don't want to eat meat anymore?
No, actually. I mean, to be honest with you, I went vegetarian. I was 3 years old and it was simple rejection. Don't want it, don't want it. You know, like a child, don't like it, don't want it. And I think after that, I started to ask my mum questions, you know, sort of, well, we never had milk, but, you know, where do eggs come from? What's this with these products? I really didn't understand the concept of the exploitation of animals. And people say that's really remarkable for somebody of 6 years old, especially back in the 1970s. And then my answer is, to put it into kind of terms that people would understand today, I was just the kid that knew what happened to Peppa Pig. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And for instance, if you told most children today, you know, Peppa's off down, you know, the slaughterhouse today, they would be horrified, and you know, if they knew the truth. I just was fortunate enough to realise the truth very, very early on, and it was very, very simple. It's never been hard for me to be vegan. It's never been anything but natural. If you love something, you don't want to harm it, and you know, I wouldn't, much as I wouldn't want to harm my mum and my dad and my sister, I always considered animals to be my extended family, and that's the honest truth. There's no other real explanation. It's just a very, very natural thing for me. It's very unnatural to consider what does happen to animals. I can hardly believe that in the 21st century it's still going on.
Well, veganism is rising in popularity. I mean, 7% of the UK average were vegan. Do you think last year? Do you think that's risen in the last year?
Oh, massively. I mean, it's every day you see something new, something more positive. I mean, I'm going back to a time when people really didn't know what vegetarianism was. They really didn't. It's really, really becoming so much more mainstream now. And for me, I noticed that in things like I went to a vegan festival and there was a big football match at Wembley. And I noticed that even some of the vendors that were selling, you know, kind of meat burgers, there was a vegan product there. So people are obviously asking from all walks of life rather than just, you know, you have to go to. I remember a time when the vegan festivals, people really used to look forward to vegan festivals. It was the only time they could buy vegan products. Wow. Now you can go in a supermarket and the full range is there. But, you know, I remember a time when there was absolutely no vegan products available anywhere.
No, definitely. Times have changed.
Yeah, they really have.
Yeah, it's incredible. And obviously you're an elite marathon runner as well, and you've smashed these world records. You ran over 100 marathons, is that correct?
Yeah. I've run like loads of marathons, like too many to count. I didn't actually set out to be a marathon runner. I don't really even now consider myself to be a runner. Wow. And it's a strange story in that after we got the sanctuary back in 1996, I thought to myself, okay, animals are coming in thick and fast. This isn't the answer to just keep rescuing. Obviously, in the immediate, it's the only thing I can do. But what can I do to promote veganism? I don't want these animals to need rescuing. I don't want there to be sanctuaries. At the time, I'm basically living, this is before social media, before the internet, before you could Google search very much. The one thing that I've always been pretty good at is sport, even though I do have a bad problem with my right knee, and that I was told I had a lot of surgeries in my teenage years and was told I would never be able to walk properly again, let alone run. So, and I do limp when I run. It's very obvious that I do limp when I run. But I thought, well, okay, I need to do something positive. It needs to be very impactful. I mean, obviously I can say that I believe that plant-based is best or vegan is best, but that's just going to be deemed to be my opinion. I want to be able to offer proof. Actions speak louder than words. And at the time, the only sport that was getting any interest in the UK, female sport, was marathon running because of Paula Radcliffe. She's broken a world record. She's doing really well. So I thought to myself, if I could just compete in and hopefully complete a marathon, that's got to be definitive proof that as a vegan, you can do anything. Because it was being billed as the toughest, most extreme event in the athletics calendar. And I think people don't realise that women were only really accepted into marathon running in the early 1980s. The first women's marathon was in 1984 Olympics in Los Angeles, and before that it was considered too tough, too extreme an event for women to do. But I never thought I'd be able to do what I do. And even now, I get doctors that write to me and say, I cringe when I think of you trying to run on that leg. And I actually went to a doctor before I was thinking of doing the ultra marathons. I wasn't sure if I'd do myself any damage. And I went to a sports doctor, and he said, I simply do not believe you haven't got a kneecap. I'm going to do an ultrasound scan to prove it to myself, to look inside your knee. And he said, I can't believe what you can do, Wow. It really can't. And but I didn't set out to be like an elite marathon runner. I realised, when I first completed a marathon, I thought, okay, this is good. But what do I do? I don't want to be. How do I promote veganism through this? I've kind of shown the world I can do it, and I've proved it to myself and those immediately around me. But how do I take it further? And I realised you were going to involve a lot of training, a lot of hard work, but it could be very productive for both the sanctuary and to promote veganism, because obviously if you do well in a race, you get interviewed and people say, what do you do for a living? I don't do the sanctuary for a living. We don't take anything out of the sanctuary, put our own money into it. But it gives you a chance to advertise it for free, and as well as promoting veganism. And it was only because of my running back in 2004, I got my first elite start in the London Marathon. So basically that meant that I was going to be running 45 minutes ahead of the main field and the men. The cameras were going to be on you. So now, in the space of a couple of years, I got myself to a point where I could stand shoulder to shoulder with Paula Radcliffe on the start line of a race, and like the cameras would go across. And at that point, we decided, me and another guy, Peter Simpson, who were running for a vegetarian cycling and athletics club, we're going to start Vegan Runners. Because it's free advertising for veganism. You're going to be running through the streets of London, no other runners around you, and people are going to notice what you've got written on your chest. And we need that word to be vegan. We need to be out there positively promoting it. And that was back in 2004. It's now one of the biggest running clubs in the UK. And I think one of the most positive forms of accidental activism there's ever been. I really do. Because you've got a captive audience. People... oh, look, what's your trick? How do you do it? And obviously, if you're winning races, people want to know how you're winning them. And the diet comes up, and you can say, I'm vegan. I've been vegan all my life practically, and they're kind of really interested. They want some of that. They want some of those times. And so it's nothing has been like sat down and sort of planned. I've just grabbed opportunities when and where they've presented and run with them. I don't. Obviously, my head has to manage things in terms of the sanctuary, but it's got instinct in my heart. If I think it's right, it feels right, I'll just go with it and run with it, creating opportunities.
So many things I want to unpack there. I mean, firstly, with being vegan, I think a lot of people realising that the health benefits and the positive impact it has on the environment as well. And that's why people, when they become plant-based, they stay plant-based. When you're talking about your knee injuries, how did you persevere on the front line next to Paula Radcliffe? Because when I have an injury and I'm running, it niggles on my mind the whole time, and I can't overcome that mental challenge. How were you able to do so?
Well, funnily enough, it was Paula Radcliffe that I once heard say, she said, you never want to go to the start of the marathon knowing you've got an injury. And I've never been to the start of a marathon knowing I haven't got one. I ignore it. I'll just accept the pain, and I will always think of those that are suffering more. So I might be in pain, and I generally am in pain, especially with a road marathon. After about 18 miles, it really sets in. That's when you really, the repetitiveness of the stride, and you basically, if you're running a fast marathon, you're on a flat course. It's just constant pounding. It hurts. And, I've got pictures of me running latter stages of marathons with tears running down my face. It's hurting so much. But I won't stop. I never give in for the animals.
So that's why you continue to do so, because you want to spread the message.
Yeah, I want to be the best I can to promote veganism in the best way I can. I don't run for... Well, Keegan came over to make the film, and he's going, well, come on, where are they, all your trophies? And I said, I don't even know. One's a dog bowl, one's... I don't do it for that. I don't... Once I've come back from a race or training or whatever, that's the bit. The running bit's over. I just go on. That's what I needed to do. I only ever used to run 2 races a year, and they would be big city marathons. And the reasoning behind that was I'm needed at the sanctuary all the time. it's financially more economical and physically more economical in the times that I'm going to be away to just select 2 races a year, one in the autumn and one in the spring, and hit them hard with training. Don't go to any local races. I could have gone and won any local race that I want. Just these 2 big races. I was invited to run the races. So, you know, I'd get like Jos Herman, Ali Gabrislass's coach, would email me and say, if you come to Amsterdam and run, I'll pay your expenses, pay your flights, if I want you on the start line. So it wasn't costing the sanctuary anything for me to run, other than the training that I was putting in, about 100 mile a week. I train alone. My knee's too bad to run on the track because it won't take bends. So I have to do my speed work on my treadmill. I've got this really weird way of doing it, but it works for me. I never run with anyone because I don't have access and time to go to a running club. So I literally bury myself for about 10, 12 weeks and train 10 times a week and really, really hard.
10 times a week? How is that possible? There's only 7 days.
Yeah, twice a day, 3 times. Tuesday, Thursday and Saturday, 2 sessions a day. Speed work and a recovery run in the evening. Longer run on Wednesday.
Recovery run in the evening. I thought that word is just a contradiction in itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about basically being able to punish yourself, but in different ways. So speed work is hard. You use different muscle groups. So you want to go out, do your speed work. Well, I do it on my treadmill. And then I have to work in between. I never rest in between. It's literally, right, trainers off, go and do the jobs, put the animals away, then go out for a recovery run.
No, it's incredible. That drive and that persistence is why you've, accidentally smashed world records.
Yeah, I broke my own world records. I think I got like 6 more Guinness certificates up in my kind of gym room. And
which ones are the other ones?
That's for the fastest woman to run a marathon on every continent and at the North Pole in not only days elapsed, but actually in running time physically. I'm just the quickest. I've run the quickest marathons on every continent. So that's, and then I broke that again. It was a very, very difficult series of events to do, because when you present to do something for Guinness, they don't just trust you. You have to prove you've really done it yourself. So I've done I've come top 20 in the London Marathon and in Berlin. I've come top 10 in major Gold Star races, which is about the best I can ever run. I've run 2:38. I'm not going to run any quicker ever. I've then won marathons, broke course records around the world, won loads of races. And I thought, okay, I can't, keep doing this. I think I've basically taken it to where it can possibly lead. And one of my kind of friends then, I'm always a bit reluctant to say he's a friend, because people think if your friends suggest you do this, what do your enemies tell you to do? But he said to me, you've done fast races, you've won loads of races, why don't you do the toughest foot race on the planet, Fiona? That proves the point with the vegan. Oh yeah, that's a good idea. Which one's that? Marathon des Sables. So this is a tough, week-long race in the desert. You carry your own supplies. It's a complete horror.
Oh my god!
So I thought, that sounds like a good idea. I'll do that. 2012, and
it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I'll do that. It did in 2011. It sounded great. I'm going across the desert, and 2012 was looming, and I'm kind of thinking, getting all this gear in this backpack, and it's getting 11 kilos in weight, and I'm thinking, how am I going to haul this across the desert for a week? But anyway, never mind. And of course, I'm an ethical vegan. So back in 2012, there weren't so many synthetic products. So I've got this massive sleeping bag, and it's 1 kilo in weight, ex-army surplus. And everybody else, when they arrived in the desert, it's got these tiny little things, they're puffing up into, mine's -10 rated and it only weighs an ounce. And mine's take me down to about 10 degrees and it's massive. What you got there, Fiona? It's a massive thing in my bag. I've got a 30-litre pack. It's bigger than I am. And the problem was with it, the week before the race, I fractured 2 toes.
Oh my god!
So I'm now left with the toughest foot race on the planet, Marathon des Sables, with 2 fractured toes, and I thought, I'm going to go and give it a shot. I went, but by the long stage, which is about 100 kilometres, I stopped at one of the checkpoints, and my foot was in such a bad state. I took the bits of bandage off that I got, because you have to do it yourself. They don't give you this kind of support. And I said to the guy I was with, Paul, what do you reckon that is on my foot? And it's the bone sticking out your little toe.
Oh my
I
god.
can see the bone sticking out my little toe. Because basically, they tell you to buy shoes a size too big to allow for the swelling, because it gets up to about 55-degree heat. It's baking hot.
This is incredible.
And it just took this, because my feet were swollen before I went. Well, my right foot was, because it was broken. So I crammed my feet into my shoe and thought I can just about get away with this if they don't swell. And of course they did swell in the heat. They swell even more. And so I was hacking my shoe to pieces to try and finish. I take all the inserts out and like make a hole for these broken toes. Anyway, I got round it about mid-range. Did the race and got the medal. That was the main thing. Finishing the Marathon de Sable. First vegan woman to do it. Ethical vegan as well. So I'd carted the massive pack with the massive supplies. And then another friend said, why don't you do the North Pole race? See, that's cold. And I just think, you know, like North Pole and a marathon. How could there be a marathon at the North Pole? This is going way up. And I contacted the race, and sure enough, there was a marathon. It is as near to the geographic North Pole as the Russians can set up their research base, you know, for the thickness of ice and landing planes. But the cost, massively prohibitive. Couldn't do it. Couldn't think about it. 12,000 euros. Couldn't even dream of it. And I think about Christmas Eve in 2012, the race organiser wrote to me and said, if you will do my race, I'll give you a place. So I went to the North Pole. Wasn't sure how I'd cope with it because I am notorious for slipping and dislocating my knee. So I wasn't sure how it would go out there. But I won the race, broke the course record, placed on the podium with the top men. And then some of the other guys in the race said, you really, really should go for this world record. You being the fastest woman to run a marathon on every continent and the North Pole. You're doing the Antarctic race. I was entered in the Antarctic race later in the year. You know, and people ask me, you know, I get loads of people, you know, especially with the Game Changer film, brought a lot of interest in plant-based living. And so kind of people come to me and say, well, what would you eat? I don't really know. I'm very, very basic. I don't focus. My main focus is not on food. But for me, there is another element to sport which always gets missed, and that's the mental approach. And if you've got a reason to be out there that's far greater than anything else that you can value on this planet, you will, I think, find that ability to dig that extra bit deep to get what you want. And I'm one of those people that I'm not selfish enough to want to just like keep going out and training and running and hurting myself, but I'm kind of, if you want, selfless enough to want to do it for the animals. And that's the honest truth. I really don't do it for any other reason. Just go for it and see what you can do. And I think, you know, for me, it's once you actually set that goal in your mind of, you've got to know why you're out there. Just going out there and going through the motions, it isn't probably not going to happen for you. But if you really believe in what you're doing and believe that what you're doing is making a difference, then I do believe it takes you to that next level. And it's just having self-belief, I think, and as I say, knowing why you're doing it and getting that straight in your head. And the sky's the limit. I mean, honestly speaking, I truly and honestly say this to people. If I can do it, anyone can.
Fiona Oakes is an incredible woman. The training she puts herself through, the insane challenges, sometimes back to back, literally just back to back each day, going to a different challenge, makes me speechless. But she has a vision, she has a drive, and that is encouraging, and I hope it inspired you. Next up is CEO and co-founder of Wicker Period Pants, Ruby Raut. We speak about why we need to have honest discussions about health education, breaking the taboo of talking about menstruation on a global scale, and how 4.3 million tampons and pads are flushed every day in the UK down the toilet, and so we need to do something about it. She talks more about period pants, how they're cost effective, and how she set up her own business. I asked Ruby, women all around the world menstruate in total for about 7 years of their life. Do you think society has gotten over the taboo of talking about menstruation?
No. One simple answer, no. And I think because there's a huge taboo around it, mainly because periods are seen as very dirty thing. You know, always from from, if you're looking at the east, from Nepal, India, from where I come from, like girls, women are not allowed to go to temple because they are seen as dirty.
Wow.
To here in the UK, you know, whenever you use a sanitary product or menstrual product, you are supposed to wrap it and put it in the bin. Those kind of thing, like, or
hiding it away.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So again, that is because it's seen as dirty. So no, I don't think so. And there's a huge taboo around it.
Yeah, because I've heard in some instances in parts of Africa, you know, children have bled in class and the teacher has asked them to leave the room, or in rural villages in other areas of the world, women who are menstruating are taken to a separate area and they're not allowed to mingle with their family. I mean, how do we break this cycle of taboo everywhere?
Educating grandparents. Now, you might seem slightly, why grandparents kind of thing? Because when growing up in any kind of culture, especially in Asian culture where I come from, you pretty much believe everything your parents or grandparents tell you, closed eyes. You know, you never ask a question. So I think we need to educate those grandparents and tell them actually this is absolutely normal thing to happen for a woman. And as far as you use the correct menstrual product in a proper way, it's fine. You know, nobody dies, no foods get rotten. Because there are a huge stigma around period and touching food or sleeping with the partner, those kind of things. So it just doesn't start and stop somewhere, you know. This is like, we need to change the mindset of the grandparents and then the parents. And I think now what we are doing is we are educating girls as young as possible so that they can openly have the conversation to their parents about period. So young generation, it's our duty. But it's our duty to educate the older generation as well, so that they don't pass that incorrect information to the next growing children.
No, definitely. I think, yeah, exactly. It's a rite of passage, yeah, for many. And, you know, it's a part of your life that's every single month. But also not only educating grandparents and young women, but also I think educating young boys as well, because half of British girls have been bullied and shamed about their period in schools.
Absolutely.
I mean, in the UK, does that surprise you at all?
It does. I mean, especially when we are so outspoken. So me coming from Asian culture is slightly different to growing up here in British culture. But when I found out that you have a separate sex education or education on periods, separate boys and girls are separated, I was absolutely quite shocked, because this doesn't happen in Nepal. Sex education, anything health education, you get it together. And also, in a way, since a very young age, because you're not allowed to go to kitchen, so everybody knows that somebody's on their period, because you're not allowed to go to kitchen, you're not allowed to touch water, kind of thing. So in a way, the concept is in head of men, but in the UK, women just do everything, whatever they wanted to do, even in the period. So not many men or boys know about it. So yes, I think education is a huge part, and I think all the sex education should be taught together. We live in a world there are men and women, almost half and half, right? So why separate when it comes to education in terms of health education or sex education?
Yeah, of course. No, that's right. I mean, looking specifically at your period pants, so an average woman spends £4,800 on sanitary products on her lifetime, which is shocking. One pack of pads is the equivalent of 4 plastic bags. What makes Wuka period pants more cost-effective and environmentally friendly, and what are they? How do they actually work?
So period pants they look like your regular underwear, but in the gusset area we have got 4 different layers. So the top layer and the bottom layer are the same fabric made out of lensing micromodal, and they wick any kind of moisture very quickly. And then the central layer is 2 different layers. One is absorbent fabric, and then the other one is leak-proof layer. So what happens is, like, when the blood goes in, it almost quickly wicks it, absorbs it, and keeps you dry. And then underneath there is a leak-proof layer that doesn't let it leak out. So you get like a leak-proof undies. That's actually how it works. And washing is simple. You just take it out, rinse the blood out, and then chuck them with your dark color clothes and hang dry them. And they are there with you for another 2 years in your drawers, so you never run out of menstrual product anymore. what makes a difference on the long run? We are very cost effective compared to disposable menstrual product. Each pair of underwear also replaces 100 tampons and pads going to landfill.
Wow.
And the plastic associated with it, as you said. I think they recently found out it's equivalent to 5 plastic bags, actually, not 4 plastic bags. So I feel like sometimes like women are conned in some way to use the disposable product and not telling the whole reality of it, because this plastic product actually ends up in landfill, or they are incinerated, or they are flushed. In fact, 4.3 million tampons, pads, panty liners are flushed every day in the UK. Every day. That's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, and it ends up in the oceans, affecting our marine life.
Absolutely. And then the whole education piece, again, is missing out that when they are teaching about period or menstruation at school, they should be teaching about the choices and how to dispose if they are using disposable menstrual product. Because nobody is born knowing that what to do with the tampons and pads, right? So we need to tell our young girls that actually that goes in the bin and gets never flushed. And also more about the choices, that they don't have to just stick with tampons and pads. There are menstrual cup, there are sponges, there are period pants, right? So
there are other options.
Yes.
I mean, when I first had my period, actually, I didn't even realise it was my period. So for a couple of days, I didn't tell anyone because I thought, oh my gosh, this is a serious problem. And then, I spoke out with my best friend at the time, and she said, no, that's your period. And she had to talk me through how to put a pad on a pair of underwear, because was learnt from her sister and passed it down to me. So you're right, it's the education of using those, but also there are other options. As you've highlighted, period pants, are the way forward. Yes. What was the process like of actually investigating and testing all these different methods?
So obviously, before jumping into any business, I think everybody should do the market research to see whether your product is market fit. I literally just put it out, had the concept in my mind, and I was like, okay, I just wanted to test whether people think the same thing that I do, and put it out there in some Facebook social forums kind of thing. And I just said like, hey, I'm doing a research kind of thing. Could you help me do some survey? And within 24 hours, I got nearly 800 response.
Wow.
It was just overwhelming. And everybody was, and not just ticking the boxes, but also making a comment and saying like, oh yeah, they are just horrible. They just give me very painful periods, or people get irritation and rashes because if you're wearing pads, because they are allergic to glue or plastic, or some people have sensory issues, those kind of thing. And when I found out, I was like, okay, so people are obviously not happy with what they are using and are looking for options and choices. For me, the most important thing was like, how can I make it more sustainable as possible? I did environmental science, so I was like determined to do something good that is not just for health, but also to the planet. And then the next process was doing the material research, what actually fabric works and what kind of absorbency they have got. We found this amazing fabric that is made in the UK. They absorb 200 times its own weight in water.
Wow.
So they're like super absorbent. And when I started, just went to one of the sewing machine shop, bought a secondhand sewing machine and started making my own undies at home. Tried myself a couple of months. They actually work. And I was like, okay, so this is good, except they were a bit tight.
Yeah.
Because I made it myself and I think I made it too small. Then we went to one of the last standing manufacturer in Wales, lingerie manufacturer in Wales, and made about 50 prototypes, and then brought in, and again went to my humble Facebook and went to like, who would like to try some underwear that absorbs your blood and you can wear it again and again? After a week, I had nearly 25 to 30 women randomly just knocking at my door and say like, I would like to try it, kind of thing.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so I handed them one pair out and asked them to give me a feedback in 2 months' time. And when they came back, one of the best results was like, they are the most comfortable thing.
That's incredible. What a story. From like humble beginnings as well. You had an idea, you thought, oh yeah, I really want to change this and do something about it. That's wonderful. So obviously that response has been fantastic.
Absolutely.
And what has the response been like continuing on, and also in Nepal as well?
Yes, it's been absolutely amazing. And Yeah, I think recently the biggest moment was recently one of my local magazine published me as the front cover kind of thing.
Oh wow, go you!
Yeah, but it was not just me. I felt empowering, but the fact that they put a topic about period as a front page cover, right? And
Imagine that years ago.
I know. Yeah, that would be like totally out of question, right? Nobody
Yeah.
would talk about it. The fact that they are talking about an underwear founded by somebody that holds period blood kind of thing, that was revolutionary. I think that was like the biggest moment for me. And also almost all the minister and prime minister of Nepal were reading the magazine. I was like,
Oh wow,
that's incredible, right? That's the
Yes.
right way forward, I think so. And then I think that's a step towards breaking any kind of stigma around period.
Yes, as we said earlier about educating men and
Exactly.
you know older people as well. So that's
absolutely.
fantastic. You've spoken briefly about politics. So more than a quarter of women have been forced to miss work or school because they can't afford period products. Does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, it does. Like, sadly, it does. Because I think in many households, priorities are still gone for other things rather than managing period. We still have girls who miss school because they don't. And that we are talking in the UK, you know. It's quite sad, like, what's happening. And I think it was a good step that the government actually made that decision very quickly.
Yeah, from early 2020, I think
Yeah,
they're now going to
yeah.
administer products in schools.
Yes, so I think 22,000 institutions are getting free menstrual product.
It's seen as a luxury item. In hospitals, they give out, you know, free shavers and foam cream, but no tampons and
Yeah.
sanitary pads. So,
I mean, surprisingly, period pants are still taxed at 20%
wow.
compared to sanitary products that are taxed at 5%. When the product itself says period pants, right? So this is something we are taking with the. I had a meeting a couple of months, last month actually, with the Secretary of State, and we're trying to work on to either reduce it down to 5% or have it all the way down to 0%. So that conversation has started. So hopefully that means we can sell either period pants for a cheaper price so that more women and girls can afford it, you know, because that 20% adds up quite a lot when you're paying for underwear.
Yes, and so more women can afford it, but also in the long run, it's more cost effective
Yes.
and environmentally
the-
friendly
yes.
as well. Obviously, it steps in the right direction, and
Yes.
it's progress. And finally, just some advice from a business perspective: if someone's got an idea and they're debating about whether to go and trial it out,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to them?
Many times when you have an idea, people think that, oh, this is going to be so expensive and this and that. There are many things that you can do guerrilla style. Try and spend as less as possible. Try to prove their hypothesis or their business idea actually works. So go small. Also go niche. You might have many ideas, or you might have one business idea, but it has got 4 different branches. Start with one. Get one thing right, get one thing done. That's how you start it. And once you get that perfect, then you move on to the next level. But ask for help. There are many times, and networking, like try and attend as many networking possible. I'm guaranteed there are many people who will be happy to help you if you just ask.
Since I spoke to Ruby, I can now highlight that she's actually been in conversation with Sainsbury's to launch her product there, so it can be more accessible for women to access different products in relation to menstruation. So good luck to her and the future of Wuka period pants. And if you want to find out more information about her product, go on to wuka.co.uk, spelled WUKA. Well, that's it from me for Season 2, Episode 2 of Let's Go Kickass today. Thank you so much to Nikki Yeoh, Fiona Oakes and Ruby Raut for being a Kickass Women's Month podcast. I think that was such an incredible lineup, and I was delighted to interview all of them. Do feel free to subscribe, comment, rate and share. And I'm Vicky Carter, and you keep kicking ass.